Okay, so this was supposed to be a YouTube live, and of course, as Murphy's Law would have it, I signed on a few minutes early, was all excited, and then the internet crapped out. So I am recording this about 22 minutes late, and I'm going to share it on my YouTube for anyone who wanted to come to view the what was supposed to be the live session. So. Anyway, without further ado, I do want to go through all of the slides and the conversation we were supposed to be having. So I'll get started and hopefully we can kick off a virtual discussion. But here we go. So the reason I thought about doing this in the first place about resetting goal setting is because I have always been, well, for the longest time, I was one of those people who would set goals sort of in my mind, kind of vague, often very many of them. And then at the end of the year, would look back, having forgotten about half of them, not achieved most of them, if any of them, and then would just move them from one year to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's one way of doing things, but it's not a very satisfying way of doing things. And so I've tried and played around with lots of different things. And this is what has started to work for me. So I've been doing what I'm about to share with all of you. It's very simple, and that's why it works. I have been consistent with it. That's another reason why it works. And it's totally doable because, of course, many of us are already too busy. We have too many things going on. And adding a whole laundry list of new ambitions, new goals, new resolutions doesn't often lead to success. So I'm here to be realistic with you all and hopefully help shift the way you think about how you set your goals. Just very quickly what to expect. If you're here, be here, right? So again, we are all very busy, but often where you've got like 10 different tabs open in our brains and on our computers, and it doesn't lead to any real ability to focus and concentrate, especially if you're thinking about sort of big strategic level issues. So I want to invite all of you to just be here and be present for the time that you are watching this. Turn off distractions and just pay attention to this very brief but helpful conversation, and also create the headspace for you to really be thinking about these things. It's the first lesson in doing less to accomplish more, right? To be purely focused on where you're at instead of constantly distracted by everything else going on in the background, literally and metaphorically. And Vegas rules. And by that, I mean whatever you want to share in the chat or in any form of communication stays private. So if you have questions, don't feel too shy about asking them, posting them, commenting, whatever it is. And Hollywood rules also apply. And by that, I mean to suspend disbelief. You know, when we go and watch these big blockbuster movies, we're not shouting at the screen, that's impossible, that's not real, that's not doable, that defies the laws of science and physics. We immerse ourselves in the experience and we just suspend disbelief and be fully there. So also I invite you to suspend disbelief about what is possible for you, about all of the baggage and history you've got when thinking about this topic around goal setting and resolutions and achievement and ambition, and just suspend disbelief. And then very quickly about me, some of you have come to this recording either because you follow me on LinkedIn or my Substack or Instagram, or maybe you've read my book. So you might know a bit about me, but very briefly for anyone who is new to me and my content, I am Rupal Patel. I am a former CIA officer turned 2 times founder and CEO, author of the book From CIA to CEO, Unconventional Life Lessons for Thinking Bigger, Leading Better, and Being Bolder. I'm also an international speaker and working on my second book, as well as having 2 young kids. So for any of you who are busy and already feeling like your brain is just overflowing, I feel you because I'm living it with you. So quickly setting the stage about this topic again, goal setting is such a fraught topic for so many reasons. One of those things is that so often we are encouraged by social media, by what I jokingly refer to as the ambition industrial complex, to really focus on the superficial changes, superficial overhauls, versus anything that is durable and sustainable. My very easy and simplified way of thinking about goals is that if you can't do whatever new habit or new goal or new practice you're trying to do, if you can't sustain that for the rest of your life, realistically, then it's probably not going to work. So, for example, binge diets or these huge like workout plans or, you know, overhauling your whole time management system. By all means, try it and experiment and do what works for you. But if you can't see yourself living like that, eating like that, exercising like that, monitoring your time like that for the rest of your life, then it's likely that the results will be short term and not very sustainable. And that often creates this sort of constant whiplash that can get really, really frustrating. So I refer to the ambition industrial complex. The other thing that I think it's responsible for is for all of us to feel like we have to set these mega goals. These like, again, these big, hairy, audacious goals, 10x your dreams, 10x your life, all of this stuff. And it's just too much. Because again, as I acknowledged a few minutes ago, so many of us already have too much going on to add then 10x to our already very, very overflowing plates. And I think it can be very exciting to think about things in a big way. It can be really motivating for some of us. But the reality is that it can often just be another way of creating the conditions for disappointment, right? If you're trying to go from 0 to 10, it's doable, of course, but you also have to stop doing pretty much everything else and focus solely on that one thing if you want a 10 exit or 100 exit or whatever, the framing is. Again, is that going to work for you, for your life, for your lifestyle, for all the other things you've got going on, your job, your family, your friends, your social circles, whatever it is? I'm not convinced. We have this obsession with creating this maximalist view of goals and ambitions, and it doesn't count if it's not big, and it has to be a massive 180 transformation or a big overhaul. I don't think that it has to be that way. And for most of us, it doesn't work. We might set those types of goals, but then very quickly find that we can't do them, we can't perform at that level, or we can't do it consistently. And then again, it creates this spiral of frustration. I've talked about maximalism a few times, so I won't go into depth again about it. But it is true. So often we are encouraged to like make these big changes when actually small sustained changes over time can create those big changes, but they are sustainable versus those big 180 transformations that are oftentimes not sustainable. Part of that is because human beings, for whatever reason, overestimate how much we can cram into 1 year. And so we try to do it all in this arbitrary 365-day period. But we also underestimate how much we can do in 5 years or even 10 years, right? The time horizon is totally arbitrary. Why does it have to be a year's goal? Why can't it just be a goal that we set and we consistently work at and chip away at? And then however long it takes is however long it takes, right? Because life has no stake in making our dreams or our ambitions come to reality, and things can get in the way, and often they do. And so my view is, yes, be very intentional and thoughtful about setting goals that are meaningful to you, and also make sure that you take some of the time pressure off. If it happens in a year, great, right? But if it doesn't, is that the end of the world? Does that mean you're a total failure and that you should give up on these things? I don't think so. It's also something we've grown up with is we compare ourselves to others, right? That person has done this huge transformation. That person has 10x their goals. That person has achieved this big thing in 1 year. And again, that is absolutely wonderful to the extent that it's real. I don't always know, but we don't need to compare ourselves to other people because we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't know what's happening in their internal, emotional, familial, social, professional lives, and all of the other things. We don't know what sacrifices they've had to make in order to achieve that thing in that time. So it's never going to be an apples for apples comparison. So try to avoid comparing yourself to others. And so I say this sort of, I set all of this context and background because there's so much noise and so much pressure around this time of year, especially, but just in general when it comes to thinking about goals and what we care about. And so, what I've started doing to keep it really simple for myself and achievable is I focus on nothing more than my big three goals for a year. And I'm inviting you all to do the same and play around and experiment with this. Only three things. Why three? Because three is doable. Three is memorable, right? We're not going to constantly be like, wait, did I set this goal or did I not? No, it's one, two, three things, right? Three big things that are really, really important. It also should be three things that are meaningful to you, right? Three big or small, but meaningful goals that if you look back at the end of this year or at any time period that you set for yourself and you've accomplished nothing but those three things, you will say to yourself, you know what? That was a good year. I'm really satisfied. Three is achievable because again, what happens is that when we add these huge lists of 20, 15, 30, sometimes more goals for a year or for however long, it doesn't often get accomplished. And then at the end of that year or whatever time period we've set, we look and say, oh my God, these are all of the things that I haven't done. And then we feel like we failed, or we feel like we suck, or we feel like there's something wrong with us when everybody else around us seems to be doing all these things. And then it creates this negative spiral and this negative feedback mechanism that makes you feel like a failure every time you come to think about your goals. Whereas if you set three intentional, meaningful goals and then work regularly to accomplish those and then accomplish them, it creates this positive feedback loop, this success spiral. And that can fuel you in a much better and a much more sustainable and a much more energized way for whatever you choose to do next, the next three things. We also need to start planning for the predictable and unpredictable things that will potentially take us off track, right? So the predictable things that might deviate from help, push us off track from pursuing what it is we want to pursue this year or in any year. No, family holidays, kids being off from school, conferences that you might have to participate in at work, the seasonal variations of what is happening at work. Do you work in an industry where quarterly reports are something that, you're constantly grappling with, or there's a big annual conference or whatever it is, right? There are predictable things that you can already see between now and December that will potentially get in the way of you achieving what you've set out to achieve because it requires time, headspace, energy, all of the resources that you have at your disposal. So plan for those predictable things, right? And don't try to evenly necessarily space out, the smaller breakdown of each individual goal. Maybe say, actually between now and April is a pretty clear window. That's when I'm going to go pretty full on and all in on these three goals that I really care about. And then from April to June, which is really busy at work, I'm just going to take my foot off the gas a little bit and just, sort of do a little bit to keep ticking along, but not overly burden myself with pressure to keep going at the same pace, right? You can fluctuate the pace at which you go through the steps to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And of course, there are always unpredictable things that knock us back, right? Or that we couldn't have foreseen. And so you can't plan for the unpredictable because of course it is unpredictable, but you can plan for how you'll get back on track, right? When you get thrown a curveball, what are you going to do? How are you going to claw back some time or energy or resources for any of that? We also need to plan in as part of our New Year's plans or our goal planning what we need to say no to, right? What are all of the things we're going to stop doing, stop saying yes to, so that we have time, capacity, energy, headspace, emotion, all of the things that we need to invest in those big three things. We have to name the trade-offs instead of pretending that we can do all the things. We can't, right? That hasn't worked so far. It's not going to work for some magical reason this year. So name the trade-offs, acknowledge the trade-offs, and make for yourself a list of all of the things that you are going to say no to make space for the things that you are trying to achieve. And then regularly check in with yourself, right? It's not enough to just set a goal and do all of these things, plan for the unpredictable, how you're going to get back on track, plan for the things you're going to say no to, and then start saying no. You need to regularly check in with yourself. I used to do a quarterly check-in just to say, okay, well, here's what I've decided I was going to do in January. Here's how things are 3 months later. What's working, what's not working, where do I need to course correct? I found, though, that 3 months for me, based on my life and the pace of my schedule, was too frequent. And I wasn't giving enough time to myself to be able to do those quarterly reflections. So now I do it twice a year. I do it around June or July, and then again in November, December. That's it. Gives me an opportunity to reflect on what progress has been made, identify any gaps and how much is left to be done, and then I can tweak accordingly and plan accordingly for the remainder of the year. So make sure you also check in regularly with yourself about how you're proceeding towards the accomplishment of these big three goals. This also will require you to manage your own expectations and other people's expectations. So again, maybe it takes a year to do the thing that you want to do. Maybe it takes you 2 years. Maybe it takes you 5 years. So choose something that is meaningful and important and do the work, but also manage how realistic it is for you to do it in a year's time or however long it takes. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago, a few years ago, I set a challenge for myself where I wanted to be able to do 10 chin ups. Now, this was something that, I love being physically strong. I love having strong upper body. And so many personal trainers was like, oh, your arms are too long. Oh, it's too difficult for girls. You should probably, and oh, you're, in your 30s and now I'm in my 40s. You should probably just, sort of not really worry too much about that. So I thought all of that was total nonsense because it is. And I started doing chin up training. And I was half-assed about it. I will be very honest with you. Some weeks I would do it consistently. Other weeks I would totally not do it at all. And so, of course, one, I wasn't putting in the hours or the time. But secondly, it didn't mean that I just stopped, right? Because it was in my head. It was one of the things that I had set an intention to accomplish. And so I committed to doing it no matter how long it took. And so even with the half-assing it, even with the intermittent, like really committing, I did it. Right? It took me over 2 years to finally get to 10 chin-ups. And I still remember the day at the gym. Actually, I blew past 10 and I was able to do 12. And I remember coming down from that chin-up bar and immediately starting to sob. And I can feel the emotion in me right now. And I remember it was this beautiful moment. I was so pleased. It was totally unexpected, right? It just went from more consistent training to all of a sudden I'd done this thing. And this woman smiled at me and she's like, wow, you're really strong. And I just smiled at myself because I knew all of the effort that went into it, right? It didn't happen in a year. It happened in more than 2 years, but I kept at it. So just manage your expectations and make sure that you don't give up if it doesn't happen in 1 year. Secondly, pay yourself first. And by this, I mean, so often the first thing we do when we wake up is check our email, turn on our phone, go through whatever, scrolling of social media that we do. And that distracts us and already pulls us into other people's agendas, other people's lives, other people's everything, right? Why not pay yourself first? Do the thing that you want to do, whether it's learn an instrument or a language or again, whatever is in your big three for the year. And do that first. You can do it for 10 minutes first thing in the morning before you let the rest of the world in, or an hour, or 20 minutes, whatever you have time for. Because then you get that positive burst of energy that comes from achieving something that you care about, that's meaningful to you, and it carries you through the rest of the day. Also, remind yourself that you don't have to do all the things in every single day. You can do one thing for one goal on one day, another thing for another goal on another day, but make sure you do one thing every single day. That consistency, that small incremental consistent activity will compound over 365 days and beyond. And as far as managing expectations, it's also important to manage expectations with others. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about trade-offs, right? You're gonna have to start saying no to things. You're gonna have to stop volunteering to plan the office party, or do your friend's I don't know, bachelorette party, or volunteer at the kids' PTA, or volunteer with a community organization, whatever it is. You're gonna have to start saying no to things. And so you need to communicate that with the people who are going to be affected, right? Because they're relying on you, or they're relying on you always saying yes because you have said yes in the past. If you're going to start saying no, you are grown up and you are now well within your rights. And I think you probably should tell the people who are going to be affected by it that you're no longer going to be available in the same way that you were available. This works also for your family, right? Partners, friends, family members, parents, siblings, kids, whoever is affected by your starting to say no, you need to communicate it with them, and communicate it with them warmly, kindly, however you need to, but you don't have to make any justification for why. You don't have to explain yourself. Just say what's changing, and then that you'll still support them in whatever way you can, or you can support them from next year or in 2 years' time, whatever it looks like. But don't get blackmailed into doing things just because people expect you to do them. So all of this I'm talking to you about creating capacity in space, right? Because accomplishing something new, doing something new, a new ambition, a new goal, a new resolution, whatever it is that you've never done before, requires time, space, energy, maybe some form of financial investment, whatever it is, but you need to create that capacity, right? And so I talked just now about saying no and communicating with others, but you can set boundaries, right? For those of you who are in a position where often you are doing pro bono work, whether as a consultant or a lawyer or a friend, right, giving advice constantly to people, you are well within your rights to create boundaries and say, you know what, I'm only going to do 10 hours of pro bono work a quarter, or maybe it's 10 hours a year. For me, I've created limits on how many pro bono speaking events that I do every year. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but every year at the beginning of the year, I intentionally set myself a limit. So that way I have a very elegant way of saying no. If someone comes to me and says, hey, will you do this event for us for free? I can say, look, I have an annual pro bono limit that on my speaking events. I've already hit that quota for this year, but if you want to talk about next year, you can be first in line for that for next year. And it gives you a nice, generous way of saying no, but also enforcing those boundaries. You can do the same thing with your volunteer hours. If you're currently volunteering 10, 15, 20 hours a week, doing whatever it is that you're doing, you can start saying, you know what, I'm only going to do 5 a week, or I'm only going to work on this one event or this one project. You don't have to constantly be giving of yourself to other things and other people if it doesn't feel right for you anymore and is distracting you from things that are more important. Similarly, friends and family, right? You can tell your kid, hey, look, I'm not going to do the Saturday soccer game anymore because I'm going to be working on this new project that's really important to me. You are well within your rights to do so. I've had to do the same with both of my kids. And it also invites them into your life. You'd be amazed at how generous kids are and how understanding kids are when you explain to them what's going on, or even partners, right? Grown adults, whoever it is. You'll be amazed at how generous they are. Some people, especially adults, might make you feel guilty about it. That's on them. That is not your problem. You can set boundaries. You don't have to be available to everybody at all times for all things. You also, I think it's helpful to start doing what I call the do, dump, delegate, the 3Ds, right? And this is something that I talk about extensively in my book, but very roughly speaking, it's about looking very clearly at every single thing that you do in given week. And then mercilessly looking at the things that, yes, you need to keep doing. Some things that you might be could dump, right? If you're indulging too much in, I don't know, watching Netflix series or you've got a lot of just invaluable task like busy work that you're doing, can you dump it, right? Do you need to be the one doing it, or can you delegate it to somebody else? This could be in personal things, it can be in professional things. Obviously all of your lives look very, very different to each other's, and in any given year it will change and fluctuate. But to relentlessly look at the things that you need to keep doing, dump the things that are not adding value or not necessary for you to be doing, or delegate to other people. I also like to talk about this idea of the 5 minute fallacy, which is, oh gosh, I've only got 5 minutes, so I may as well just scroll on Instagram or, read a book or whatever it is. You'd be amazed at how quickly 5 minutes adds up. I did the calculations at one point, and I think over the course of a year, 5 minutes sort of here and there or every single day adds up to a couple of working days, right? So if you've only got 5 minutes in a day to work towards or chip away at one of the things, one of your big three goals, use those 5 minutes. Again, we don't have to give in to this maximalist demand that, oh, if you haven't done like a 3 hour power session on something or 90 minutes of deep work, it doesn't count. If you can do those things, of course you should. But sometimes all we've got is these 5 minutes of like snacking, right? One of my personal trainers once referred to it as, in an exercise context, as exercise snacking. You don't have an hour today, but you've got 5 minutes. Just do a set of chin ups or push ups or squats or whatever for 5 minutes. The same is true for other goals and ambitions, right? You don't have 2 hours to write your novel today? Cool. Write 5 minutes on your commute to work. You can do a lot in 5 minutes a day. You can't do it as fast if you only have 5 minutes a day, but also, again, it's that small, consistent progress, right? Some days you'll have 5 minutes, some days you'll have 5 hours. Use what you've got. So we've talked about a lot of things. A lot of this is just about reframing also how you think about your goals, much less how you actually practically set them and then track how you're doing on them. So how are you going to implement this? First and foremost, it's still early in the year, right? We're still in the earlier part of January. So review the goals that you may have already given up on or been frustrated by or been like, oh, I haven't made any progress, so I'm just going to scrap it. Review them, maybe reset where needed, and then look at what of those are actually meaningful, right? What three things, only three things from your potential very, very long list, do you really want to commit to this year? So for me, I will be very upfront and honest with you. For this year, my big three goals is to finish my second book, to launch my new online course, and to finally give my health and nutrition the time and attention it deserves. Those are the three things. Of course, I'm going to be doing other things beyond those three, right? But those are the three that I'm committing the most time, effort, energy, resources, etc., to this year. So for you, because for me, sorry, those are the three things that if I look back at the end of this year, I can, and I've only done those three things and nothing else, I can say, you know what, this was a really good year. So for you, what are those three things? And readjust your plans for the year and really crystallize and distill it to just those three. We've talked about this a lot, but build the space. Right? How are you going to make time for this? What are you going to start saying no to? Where in the week are you going to start building in those little blocks of time to do this thing? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever you've got, but start putting it in. This is something that's really, really powerful. And this is something I would encourage you to actually write in some capacity, either sort of handwrite or on your computer, but do actually make this concrete. List all of the things that you're not going to do this year. And this might be things that will help make that time and space for your goals, but it can also be things that you've just been frustrated by, you're not seeing traction, you're like, you know what, it's not even worth pursuing anymore. But what are you not going to do this year? Maybe you're not going to volunteer anymore. Maybe you're not going to make yourself as available to I don't know, friends anymore. Maybe you're not going to go to that family reunion. Whatever it is, right? No judgment. But what are you not going to do? You're not going to do all the social media things. You're not going to, I don't know, obsess over your follower growth, whatever, right? Like there's so many things that many of us get distracted by. So write down the things that you are not going to do this year. I've said this a few different ways and a few different times, but calendarize when you're going to do all this that you're going to do, right? The big three goals. When are you going to pay yourself first? Is it first thing in the morning? Is it going to be last thing at night? Is it during your lunch break? Is it during your commute? When are you going to do these things? And then make sure you commit. You decide the night before, maybe, or on the day of, if you need to. What's the one thing that you can do today, every single day, to move the needle forward, to make that incremental progress, to keep you going, building momentum towards achieving those big three things? One big, important goal for the day. Now, if we had been live, I would have had time for Q&A, but sadly, we had some internet issues, so we're not live. So while I can't do live Q&A, I would love, love, love to hear from you. So you can write your questions in the comments or in the comments below. You can write to me, DM me personally on LinkedIn if that's where you're seeing this. But we've got options. Send me your questions. I would love to hear from you. And genuinely, don't try to boil the ocean. You can accomplish big things, but you cannot accomplish all the things. Limit your goals for this year to three big, meaningful goals. So they can be small, meaningful goals, but things that are important to you. And you will be so amazed how at the end of this year, if you do nothing other than make progress towards those three things, you will feel so different going into the next year and the next year and the next year. So thank you all for being here with me. Look forward to hearing from you in whatever format we can stay in touch. And hopefully next time we can be live together. Thanks again. Bye.